Hey, I'm Tashi and welcome to my home. In this video tutorial, we are going to be making some citrus coasters to get us in the mood for the spring and summer seasons. Let's get started.
I love yarn. I love yarn. I love yarn. I love yarn.
Okay, let's first talk about the supplies that you're going to need in order to make this set of citrus coasters. So first of all, if you purchased my citrus coaster crochet kit, this is what it's going to look like, and it's going to come with almost everything that you need in order to make the coasters. Hi, Kevin. The only thing that you'll need to grab is a pair of scissors, and it can just be any pair of scissors that you have laying around the house. But otherwise, everything that you need is in the kit. So you will get a little package with some fun stickers, but it'll also include a needle. So if you're not using the kit, just make sure you have some sort of needle for weaving in your ends. And it will also include a stitch marker, which is optional, but I do recommend it. Do you need pets? And then of course, the kit comes with all of the colors of yarn that you're gonna need to make this set of 3 of these citrus coasters. If you didn't purchase the kit, then you can just grab any yarn that you have laying around the house. We're using a worsted weight yarn, so it's a size 4 yarn, and we're using cotton because cotton is really good for coasters because it is absorbent. So I do recommend using cotton or some other kind of natural fiber like bamboo or something like that instead of acrylic, but acrylic will also work as well. So included in the kit are a bunch of different brands of cotton yarn because I wanted to get the citrus colors right. So for instance, Bernat has a cotton yarn that we're going to be using to make the lime color. And then for the pink and the yellow, I'm using I Love This Cotton, which you can find at Hobby Lobby. And then for the white, I am using the Lion brand 24/7 cotton in white. But again, whatever colors you want to use in order to make your citrus coasters, you're more than welcome to use if you didn't purchase my kit. If you want to purchase the kit, the link is in the description below, so feel free to check that out. Once you have all your supplies gathered, we'll go ahead and get started. For this tutorial, we're actually going to be using the pink yarn to make our coaster. So go ahead and pull out whatever color yarn you're going to be using along with your white for your center color. So you'll need a center color and then you'll also need the main color of your coaster. One thing that I also did forget to mention you're going to need is, of course, you're going to need a crochet hook. Obviously, we can't crochet without a crochet hook. I'm using a 5.5 millimeter hook, but really for this project, you can use whatever size hook you want. Just know that the smaller hook size you use, the smaller around your coaster is going to be, and the bigger you use, the bigger your coaster is going to be. So just kind of keep that in mind. I did write the pattern using a 5.5 millimeter hook. Kevin really wants to help. Okay, so for now we're going to set our colored yarn off to the side and we're going to start with our white yarn because we're going to start by making this center portion of the coaster. So to do that, we're going to make what's called a magic circle or a magic ring. People call it different things. And there's a couple ways that you can do this. I'm going to show you as slowly as possible how I like to make the magic ring. And this is the typical way that people tend to make this. So start by just draping the yarn tail over the back of your hand. And what we're going to do is I like to hold it with my thumb and I like to wrap it and make an X over the back of my hand. And then it will make these 2 parallel lines on the top of your fingers. From there, what you're going to do is you're going to take your hook, you're going to go under the first string and over the second string, and then you're going to pull. Now, when I pull, if I were to just pull this all the way out, it makes a slip knot. So that's one way that you can make a slip knot. But in order to make a magic ring, after you make the X, you go under and over and pull, you're going to give it a little twist. So 1 twist, okay? And then we want to keep this circle. So you can kind of see I have a circle around my fingers that's going on. So I want to make sure that this circle stays. So I like to do this by pinching all of the strands right here with my fingers holding my hook. And then I just remove my fingers from that circle. So you can see there is kind of a loop here. Don't close that loop. What we're going to do is we're going to take the tail of our yarn that's attached to our yarn ball or our skein, and holding all of the loops with my other hand. So I'm just going to kind of shift them all over, and it's okay if it's really loose right now. Just make sure not to close that circle again. What I'm going to do is I am just going to yarn over and pull through that loop on my hook. And what this will do is this will secure so that you can then drop all of your strands and it will keep this circle shape for you. Now you'll notice that we have this little tail coming out of our hook as well. So we have a circle, and then we've got this little tail, and then we have our tail that's attached to our yarn ball. We're going to crochet over this tail and our circle. So we're going to be crocheting over this part right here. And it's really important for this small tail to stay underneath all of our stitches. Otherwise, our magic circle is not going to work. So I'll kind of show you this as we progress through the pattern. So once you have your magic circle made, we're ready to go ahead and get started with our first round. So for the first round of our coaster, what we're going to do is we're going to do 12 double crochets around our magic circle. And what that will do is it will create this centerpiece here. So what you can do is you have two options for starting. The pattern that you receive in the kit will tell you to chain 3, which is a totally acceptable start. Instead of chaining 3, however, what I like to do is I like to do what's called a stacked double crochet. So that's what I'm going to be showing you how to do in this tutorial. But just know if the stacked double crochet is too hard, you can just chain 3. So to do a stacked single crochet is what it's called. We're going to actually just do a single crochet into this magic circle. So you're going to stick your hook through the center of the circle. So I'm literally just going through that giant circle. You're going to yarn over and pull up a loop. So you should have 2 loops on your hook. And then we're going to yarn over and we're going to pull through both loops. That's a single crochet. Now, in order to make a stacked single crochet, which will count as our first double crochet, we're going to do 1 more single crochet on top of the one that we already have. So you'll see there are 2 bars that we have here. We're going to go through this bar right here that's on our left. So you're going to stick your hook between those 2 bars and just under that left bar. And you'll notice I'm kind of pulling it with my fingernail to get my hook underneath there. Just like that. And then you'll yarn over and you're just going to pull through that first loop. So once we pull through that first loop, again, we should have 2 loops on our hook, then we'll yarn over and we'll pull through 2. And that's how you do a stacked single crochet. And I like doing this instead of chaining 3 because it looks more like a double crochet than the chain 3 does. So it just kind of makes everything blend together a little more seamlessly. But again, if you prefer, you can just do a chain 3 at the beginning. I'm going to pull this small tail a little bit to tighten my circle just a smidge, just like that. And then we're going to finish out with our 11 more double crochets because this stacked single crochet counts as our first double crochet. So we're going to go ahead and do 11 more. So to do a regular double crochet, what you do is you yarn over, then you're going to stick your hook through the center of that circle. And notice I'm making sure that I'm going over the tail as well. So through the center, yarn over and pull up a loop. You should have 3 loops on your hook. Then you're going to yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And there we have our second double crochet. We need to do that 10 more times. So I'll show you slowly one more time. To do a double crochet, you yarn over, you stick your hook through the circle, yarn over, pull up a loop. You should have 3 loops on your hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. So there we have 3. Now we will just continue adding these double crochets until we get to a total of 12, including that first stacked single crochet that we made. Now, if you end up, as you're building out your double crochets, if this tail is starting to disappear, we don't want it to get lost underneath our double crochets. So if you're starting to run out of this tail, you can just pull it a little bit. Tighten that circle, and then you'll have a longer tail to continue crocheting over. Because that's how we're going to fully tighten our circle once we get to the end of our 12 double crochets. So it's really important that we don't lose that underneath our stitches. Okay, I'm on my last double crochet here. And you're just going to want to make sure that you have exactly 12. So I'm going to show you how you can kind of count to make sure you have the correct number. So if you just kind of tip your work up towards you, you're going to notice kind of all of these little V's on top of your work. Each of those V's is a stitch. So I like to just start from the beginning, find my first V, and then I just count to make sure that I have 12. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. So we have 12 stitches. So what we're going to do now is we're going to tighten this circle. So I'm just going to take my tail and I'm going to pull it. And what that'll do is it will cinch up this circle. And you want to pull it nice and tight because we don't want a gap there. So I really like to give it a yank. If you're using cotton yarn is really strong, so it shouldn't snap if you pull it really hard. Now to finish off this round, what we're going to do is we're going to slip stitch into the top of that first double crochet that we made. So it will either be the top of your chain 3 or it will be the top of your stacked single crochet. So you'll just slip your hook through the top of that stitch. So I'm going through the V at the top of that stitch, and then you're going to yarn over and you're going to pull through the V, and you're going to pull through the loop on your hook. That is a slip stitch. And then what we can do is you can cut your white yarn, and you don't have to leave a super long tail. And then we're going to fasten off. So all I like to do for fastening off is I literally just pull my hook out along with the yarn. Then I like to sew my ends in after I finish this first round, just so that they're not in my way as I continue making my coaster. So I'm going to grab my needle and I'm going to show you how I sew my ends in to make it look a little more seamless. So go ahead and stick the yarn of that tail you just pulled out through your needle. And what I like to do is I like to kind of mimic the V shape when I'm doing my weave in. So what I mean by that is I will take my needle and I'll find the next V along the top of my work, and I stick my needle right through the front of that next V, right next to where I fastened off, pull it through, and then I'm going to stick it behind that next V, kind of right underneath where I fastened off, and pull it through. It just kind of makes it look like another stitch and makes it blend in a little better, in my opinion. Then I'm going to kind of continue weaving this strand down towards the center of my work. So I'll just go a few stitches down. And this doesn't have to be perfect by any means. So I'm just going to stop it there. And then I'm going to take the tail that's from the center of my piece, and I'm going to weave that around in the opposite direction that it's coming out of the center. So I can see that the yarn is coming out right here, and it's wrapped around this way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch back around the circle in the opposite direction, and I'm going to stop kind of right next to this other tail so that I can tie them together. Now, when I'm doing this, I want to be really careful. I don't want to go through that same stitch that the yarn is coming out of, because that will undo my work. So instead, I'm going to skip over at least one strand of yarn before I start weaving through in the opposite direction. And I just take this around the circle, usually just once when I'm making these coasters, because the chances of them falling apart are not super high. And then I'll just pop out again, kind of right next to that other strand of yarn, like so. And what I like to do here is I just like to tie a triple knot. So I just like I'm tying my shoes like this. And don't pull it too tight, otherwise it's going to start scrunching on you. So I just kind of like to make sure everything's flat after that first knot. And then I tie 2 more, just to make sure it's super secure. And I'll pull that third knot as tight as I can before I snip off my ends. So then I'll take my scissors and just kind of hold everything tight, and I'll get as close to that knot as I can without cutting the actual knot. Snip that off. And there we have round 1 of our coaster done. So now we'll head to round 2. For round 2, you're going to want to grab the main color of your coaster. So I'm doing pink, and we're going to want to start by making a slip knot. So I did show you earlier how to make a slip knot. You can do the same method that we did to make our magic circle, where you make an X over the back of your hand, 2 parallel lines on the front. You can go under and over, grab that second piece of yarn, give it a twist, and while you're holding both tails, so I'm going to hold both tails of my yarn, instead of making a magic circle, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pull this tight, and that will make a slip knot. I'll grab the long piece of yarn that's attached to my skein or my ball and just give it a pull till that knot slides right up to my hook. So that's an easy way that you can make a slip knot. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab our center piece and we're going to hook this on with another stacked single crochet. So what I like to do is I like to find where I fastened off. You can always tell because it looks a little funkier than your other stitches. So this is right where I fastened off. So I'm going to go into the stitch that's just to the left of where I fastened off, and I'm going to stick my hook through the front of that stitch. So again, I'm just kind of going right under that V of the top of the stitch. I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop. So I should have 2 loops on my hook. One was from when we had just our slip knot on there, and then I just pulled up the second one. Then I'll yarn over and pull through 2. Now I also want to point out that I am holding that tail just to kind of keep the knot from sliding all over the place. Now to make my stacked single crochet, remember I'm going to do another single crochet on top of this one. So I'm going to stick my hook under that left side bar of the single crochet, right like that, yarn over, pull a loop through that bar, so I'll have 2 loops on my hook, then I yarn over and I pull through 2. So there we have our first double crochet. What we're doing on this round is we're putting 2 double crochets into every stitch all the way around. So we had 12 on our first round. We're going to have 24 double crochets on the second round. So I have my first double crochet, which is actually a stacked single crochet in that first stitch. So I'm going to add 1 more double crochet into that same stitch. So again, I'll yarn over. I'm going to stick my hook through that same loop, and I am just going to crochet over this tail so I don't have to weave it in later. I'm going to yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Then I'll move on to the next stitch, which is just to the left of it right here. And I'm going to do again 2 double crochets into that stitch. And you'll continue this all the way around until you have a total of 24 stitches in this round. So I'm going to finish off this round and I will meet you at the end of it. All right, I am coming to the end of my second round, so I kind of just wanted to show you here. So what we're going to end up doing is in this place where we fastened off, you should end again with 2 single crochets here. And you want to make sure that you have 24 stitches total for this round. So if you wanted to, you could kind of tip the piece up towards you and you're looking for these V's, and you just want to count all the V's to make sure that you'll have 24 total. So if I count right now, I should have 22 because I should still have 2 more to do. So let's count really quick. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 22. So it's looking good. So once I add my last 2, I will have 24. So again, I'm just going to kind of stick my hook wherever I can in that last stitch. I know it may have gotten a little funky with our fastening off. And I'll finish with my last one here. And voila, we have ended that round. So now what we're going to do is we're going to stick our hook into the top of that stacked single crochet or the top of the chain 3 if you chose to start with the chain 3. So we'll just put our hook through the front of that stitch and underneath the V, we'll pull a loop through and pull it through. And that's how we end round 2. Now we're going to move on to round 3. So for round 3, what I like to do is I like to go into the stitch that's just to the left of where I slip stitched my round together. And again, I'm going to start with a stacked single crochet. So I'll stick my hook through, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, pull through 2, and then I'll go through the left bar of that single crochet, pull up a loop, and then yarn over, pull through 2. Now what we're doing in this round is we're going to alternate a double crochet and a double crochet increase, double crochet, double crochet increase. So to do a double crochet increase, all you're going to do is you're going to place 2 double crochets into the same stitch. So this stacked single crochet counts as my first double crochet. So in the next stitch, I'm actually going to place 2 double crochets. So there's one, and I'll do one more into the same stitch. So just put your hook through the exact same loop and do another double crochet. Then in the next stitch, we're just going to do 1 double crochet. And then the next loop is our increase. So we'll do 2 double crochets into the next loop. And you'll just continue this pattern all the way around your 3rd round for a total of 36 stitches by the end of this round. So I'm going to keep going with this pattern of a double crochet followed by a double crochet increase, and I will meet you at the end of the round. Okay, I'm getting towards the end of my 3rd round, so I just wanted to show you kind of how I finish it. So I have 2 stitches left. You should always end on the double crochet increase. So I am going to do a double crochet, and then in this last stitch right here, I'm going to make sure I do a double crochet increase. If you don't end on a double crochet increase, you probably did something wrong. And again, you can count your stitches to make sure that you have a total of 36 for your 3rd round. Then what we're going to do to finish off this round is we're going to slip stitch into the top of our stacked single crochet, or a chain 3 if you chose to do it that way. But instead of cutting the yarn like we did for our 1st round, we're actually just going to leave it because we will use it for the final round of our coaster. So this is where you're going to want your stitch marker if you have one on hand. You can also use a safety pin or another piece of yarn, or you don't have to use it. You could just pull a really long tail here. We just want to make sure that this tail does not come undone and unravel our work while we're working our next round. So I'm just going to put my stitch marker into this loop just to hold it secure, so that way it's not going to unravel that round. Because now what we're going to do is we're going to switch back to our white yarn to create this cute little white piece around the outside of the center of our coaster. So you can see we have the main part of the coaster done. Now we're just adding the border. So we will pull up the pink color for that final round. But let's go ahead and grab our white, and we'll get started on round 4. I've already showed you one way to make a slip stitch. I'm going to show you another way, which is the way that I like to do it because it's super fast, really easy. I just like to drape the yarn over my pointer finger and my thumb, and I like to grab it with my non-dominant hand. I give it a twist, just one crossover, and then I grab the long tail that's attached to the skein and I just pull it through, just like that. So that's just another way that you can make a slip stitch, but honestly, however you like to make it is perfectly fine. There's really no right or wrong way. Okay, so now we're gonna go ahead and grab our coaster that's kind of coming together here, and we're going to want to stick our hook through a stitch that's right next to where our yarn from our 3rd round is coming out. So I, again, just like to go to the stitch that's just to the left of it. Trust me, you want to be as close to that as you possibly can. It's going to make your life way easier. So I'm just going to go ahead and stick my hook through that stitch, and then we're going to yarn over, pull up a loop, and then we'll yarn over and pull through the 2 loops on our hook to make a single crochet. So this entire round is composed of just single crochets, but what we're going to do is we're going to do a single crochet in the first 2 stitches, and then we'll have a single crochet increase. And that's going to be the pattern that repeats for this entire round. Single crochet, single crochet, single crochet increase. So we have our first single crochet, and again, I'm just going to take this white yarn tail and crochet over it, just so I don't have to weave it in later. But again, if you want to weave it in later, that's totally fine. So I have 1 single crochet. I need 1 single crochet in the next stitch. And then I'll do 2 single crochets in the stitch that follows. So there's 1. I'm just going to stick my hook back through that same loop, yarn over, pull up a loop, and yarn over, pull through 2 to make 2 single crochets. So you'll continue that pattern, 1 single crochet, next loop, 1 single crochet, and next 2 single crochets, just like that. So you'll continue this all the way around and you should have a total of 48 stitches once you finish this round. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish this and I will meet you at the end of this round. Okay, I'm coming up to the end of this fourth round here. So I just kind of wanted to show you how I finished this off. Now, just like our third round, you should end on a single crochet increase. So I have two visible stitches left here, and then I've got this one that my yarn is coming out of. So I've got one single crochet, and now I need to end with a single crochet increase. So what I like to do for this is I kind of just like to pull this tail to stretch out that stitch, because our stitch is this little horizontal bar right there. So we want to get underneath that. So sometimes I'll just kind of grab it and try to pull it out a little bit too, just so that I have more room. And then I drape my loop over to the left and just kind of hold it secure while I do my last two single crochets into this stitch right here. So there's one and there's two. There we go. Okay, now we're going to fasten off this round. So just as a reminder to do that, we stick our hook through the first single crochet. Now it does kind of tend to wrap around a little bit, so don't be fooled. This is not the first single crochet. You want to find where that kind of V is that connects it to the third round, and the top of that is where you have our single crochet. So it's right here. So I'm going to stick my hook under that stitch, yarn over, pull through, and pull through. Now, we're going to pull this through just like we did when we fastened off for our first round. But the trick with this round is we want to leave a really long tail, because we're going to use the tail to sew all of these lines on our citrus coaster. So I usually leave about a 2-foot tail is what I've found I need. Another way you can kind of measure it is you can just kind of drape the yarn from the outside of your coaster to the inside. And you want to do this 5 or 6 times depending on how many lines you want on your hook. I like to usually have 6. So it does need to go, you need to have enough to go like back and forth. So like this would be 1. And then I want to do that 6 more times. So there would be 2 and 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. So again, it's usually about 2 feet is what you want. It's better to be safe than sorry. So I would say do more if you're not sure. And then you can just cut it and put our ball off to the side, and then we're going to pull this long tail through. So I just like to grab it with my hands and just pull it all the way through, just like that. And we're just going to leave this dangling because we will come back to it later. So now for our final round, we're going to use this pink loop that we placed our stitch marker in. So you do want to pull it so that it is a little bit larger. If it got a little bit tight, you can remove your stitch marker. And then we want to pull this loop through to the front of our work. So what I like to do is I just like to stick my hook through the loop that's like right in front of this main color. So that's this one right here. I'll just go under the V of it, and then you'll put the pink or the main color through your hook and just pull it up to the front, just like that. And I do like to just kind of cinch it so that it's a normal loop size, and now we can crochet as normal with it. So our final round of our coaster is just going to be 1 single crochet into every stitch. So it should be a total of 48 single crochets around the outside of our work. So you'll notice that this first one, I only have 1 loop, so I'm actually going to go into the next stitch, which should be just off to the left of where this yarn tail is coming out of. Now, don't crochet over this white yarn tail because, again, remember, we're going to use that to sew our lines. So just kind of let it drape, let it dangle behind, and just continue on your merry way with your single crochets. And it's just 1 single crochet into every stitch all the way around. Pretty easy way to finish off your coaster. So I'm going to finish my single crochets all the way around, and I will meet you at the end for sewing on the finishing details of our coaster. All right, I am to the last stitch of my round, which is right here. And then I'm going to slip stitch into that first stitch and fasten off. So I'll just, again, stick my hook under, pull through, then I can clip a little tail for weaving in and pull that pink color through. Yay! Okay, so there we have finished the main portion of our coaster. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to do the sewing of the lines just to add some finishing details to our beautiful citrus coaster. I'm gonna start by showing you how I like to fasten this final tail through. So I'm just gonna grab my needle and thread it with the yarn. And again, I just kind of like to sew it into a V into the stitch that's right next to it here, just like that. And then what I'll do is I actually flip it. I'll just pull it down a little bit below that final stitch so that it comes out right next to this white yarn, and I will tie them together actually so that it stays nice and secure. And again, I am a fan of the triple knot, so I'll just tie the triple knot here just to make sure it does not come undone. And then I like to clip off all of my unnecessary ends. So you can kind of see I've got some ends coming out from when I crocheted over my tails in the previous rounds. Now, be very careful not to clip this long piece of yarn, the white one, because we're gonna, again, use that to crochet. So I'm just going to clip off the pink one. And then I'm gonna just snip off these other tails so that everything is looking nice and clean and I only have one long tail to worry about. Okay, so now we're going to go ahead and thread this through our needle, and I will show you how I crochet on the final rows. So what we're going to do is, I'm gonna flip to the front side of my work here. We're just going to be taking our string out through the bottom of the white round, and then we'll take it down to the top of the first round. So we're just really sewing from here to here. So it's not like all the way from the outside to the very inside, just from the white to the white, essentially. Now there's a couple ways that you can do this, kind of depending on your preference. You're gonna notice that I actually sew it through each round just because I think it makes it look a little more stable and secure. But what you can also do is you can do one long one if you really don't like sewing. So I'm gonna show you both ways. So I'll start by I stick my needle through the bottom of that white round, and I will just stick it out, the closest to where that tail's kind of coming out, and just give it a little pull here. Now with this, you want to make sure not to pull too hard, or what's going to happen is it's going to curl your coaster. So just try to be gentle while you're sewing your final details on. So one way that you can do this is you can just sew a really long line by just sticking your needle through the top of that first round and pulling it like so. And you'll notice I like to hold my coaster as I'm sewing, just so that, again, I don't pinch it together too much. So that's one way to do it, but I just feel like the lines kind of move around too much when I sew it that way, which is why I like to sew it into the center of the two middle rounds as well. So what I will do is I will actually bring this down and I will stick my needle through the center of rounds 2 and rounds 3, and I'll pull it out so you can see it kind of coming out the backside here. And then I'll take my needle and then I will poke it up from behind on top of that first round. And then I just work my way backwards. So then I will go again through the middle to finish off that line. Okay, so you can kind of see that it's making a line there. And then I will come back up through the same spot, but I don't bring it all the way through. So I'm gonna kind of show you what I do on the back side here. So instead of poking it all the way through to the front, what I do is I just kind of stick it underneath the stitch and pull it through that way. And then I'm going to work it underneath the stitches to take it around to where I'm going to sew my next line. Now, the way that I count out the spacing of my lines is I want 6 of these lines. You could also do, you can see on this one, I just did 5. So just depending on how much you want it spaced out, all you're going to do is you're going to count your stitches on round 3 of your coaster. So if you want the 5 lines, you're going to put 8 stitches from round 3 in between each line that you sew. If you want the 6 lines, then you will just put 6 stitches in between each line that you sew. So it's totally up to you. It's completely a preference thing. I prefer the 6 lines, so that's what I'm going to keep doing. So I just kind of like to wiggle my yarn along the back here with my needle, and I just go underneath the back stitches, and I will just carry it over until I'm 6 stitches over, approximately. And I usually do have to kind of stop and count here. So this one's a little hard to see because this was like the beginning of where all our rounds were, so it gets a little funky, but I'll go approximately 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And you can kind of count the stitches, because if you pull it apart, each bar is a stitch. So you just want to count the bars. So I'm just counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bars. So I want to weave over like one more here, and then I will start crocheting, or excuse me, I'll start sewing my next one. So once you're over however many you want for your next line, you again just stick your needle through to the front, and then I go halfway down, I go out the bottom, come back up the top, and all the way back up on the back side. And then I just keep working it around the same exact way. All right, I am just finishing sewing my very last line. So I want to show you how I finished it off. So once you're happy with the placement and the way all of your lines look, you can kind of just weave this end in. So I just like to weave it a couple more stitches back and forth. And I will tie a knot with this too. So the way that I do that is I will just stick my yarn on the opposite side of where it's coming out of. And then I just stick my needle through the loop and kind of pull it tight. And that just puts a small knot in. And then I'll continue to kind of weave like back and forth for a few more stitches just to make sure it's really secure and it's not going to ever come undone. And once I'm satisfied that I have sufficiently woven this bad boy in and it's super secure, I will just clip the end, and there you have your beautiful citrus coaster. Thank you guys so much for watching this tutorial. I'll see you next time for another crafting adventure.